There we go. All right, ladies and gents, let's get into this. If you're tuning in live, nice. If you're watching the recording, also nice. It just means that you're going to be getting a different experience through this process. So we're going to be going through the objections without the BS. The objective of today's lesson is really to help someone be able to make a confident decision. This is going to be, I'd say, maybe 30% how you go about doing the objection handling. And then the rest of the process is actually going to be how can we remove the objections after we continue to see objections come up over and over again? So, quick recap of yesterday, we went through basically the 7 stages of a consultation, how to be able to set up the stage and pre-frame the discovery questions, what you're going to be asking, how we go about and actually ask a diagnosis and tell people, hey, this is what's going on. And then the way that you make the prescription, of course, alignment, and then how to be able to pitch that investment. So the only thing that we are focusing on inside of today's masterclass is stage 7, the decision. Helping people make a decision is your responsibility as a coach, because there are so many different reasons as to why someone is not going to be taking action on their health. It could be fear-based. Well, normally it's fear-based. Could be fear-based decision, could be a decision of a mindset or a story, in which case maybe they've tried multiple things before and it hasn't worked. Or maybe you could effectively be their first coach or the first person they're working with, in which case it's like, okay, what do I have to do next to go through this process? So this is where you might get some potential objections. And I want to let you guys know an objection is not something that you're going to defeat. The goal is not to overcome someone. And I actually want to share with you a story. And when I share the story, I want to let you know I don't blame the mentor. I used to be the type of person that whenever a mentor or a coach would tell me something, I would just do it verbatim. And I didn't really take the time to think, how does this apply to me? So I was working with a mentor. This was very early in my business, like first 6, 7 months of opening up my facility. And on a sales consultation, he was like, listen, you need to be approaching these people and you literally need to slay them. It's you versus them. You're a warrior and you got to get them to close. And so I assumed that verbatim. And I said, well, every person that's going to be in front of me, even using the words now is something that's such an energetic disconnect, because you're not slaying anybody. Like, it's such a strange term, but I'll never forget, because that's exactly what he said, that the person in front of you, like, your job is to close them. And that is basically it. And so I went through the sales process, effectively signing up every single person. And every time there was an objection, I would basically push them to be able to do the close. Like, I would effectively either use like some type of a form of guilt without even recognizing it, or a form of overwhelm to get them to say yes. And then I was finding that a lot of the people in a part of the process would either early cancel, they would have a high no-show rate to a lot of the sessions. And even if they did stick around, I would have to continuously pressure them and guilt them into continuing to go through the process. It actually made me hate the way that I operated in terms of sales. I didn't like doing that with people. I always felt this sort of disconnect where all of a sudden I went from being a coach to now it's kind of you versus me. And I started listening back to the consultations, and as I was listening, I was really hearing a weird energy where someone was slowly pushing away from me. And that's when I decided, you know what? I understand the aspect of getting these people to make a commitment, which is basically what he was trying to convey, my mentor. But there's tons of different ways that you can get a commitment. So the goal is not to defeat the objection. Your primary responsibility is for you to be able to understand what is still unclear for this person to be an all-in yes. And this is where we then shift the consultation from pressure to perspective. So typical salespeople are taught pressure sales tactics, and this is the type of sales that everybody cannot stand, me included. So how many of you were taught to overcome the prospect? Whatever it is, like you basically, whatever objection you get, you're going to overcome it. Or you're on these constant sales loops, or what they would call like objection loop cycles, where you ask a set of 3 questions and you continue to go around until they end up signing up or until they leave, or even just pushing boundaries. Things like that create an energetic disconnect where it's you versus them. Where in this case, I want to start focusing on something a little bit different, which is helping you guys recognize what has not been resolved. Because anytime you get an objection, if you're getting it once, there's something that wasn't clear in your communication process. And if you're getting the same objection over and over again, then we can actually tie this back into where the heck did this objection come from? So I said this at CanFit, and I will say this again. It is you plus them versus the problem. Your goal when you're helping someone process an objection is for you to sit on the same side of the table, and the objection is the thing standing in the way for them being able to succeed, not you standing in the way for them to be able to succeed. This is where every part of the conversation is about collaborating. How do I help this person understand that that is the very thing that is in the way? And I want to share with you guys a little bit of a story here about the training station. I talked a little bit about them, of course, at CanFit. So they are a very, very large facility that we're working with, 33,000 square feet. They've got 1,100 members, I think closer to 1,300 at this point. Their offer structure, they sell regular 99 a month memberships. And I share this because what they were really looking to be able to push and promote was, of course, their personal training and their transformation. Their personal training sessions average an $850 a month figure investment, and it's a minimum 4-month commitment. And their transformation program, if someone is looking for a lifestyle change that involves nutrition and accountability with a coach, that's starting at $1,250 a month. So they were like, hey, look, we want to be able to fill this program. We have a great level of service. We have nutrition with this as a part of the process. We have training. We have accountability coaches. They've got a pretty robust system. And even the way that they do body fat and measuring, like it's pretty state of the art. Despite that, though, like they were having a lot of consultation volume for personal training. Inside their facility, 22 to 25 consults were averaging a week, and yet they kept getting the same objections over and over again. The first one was, I need to think about it. And I'm sure that's probably the most common objection that all of you are going to be experiencing is, hey, look, I need to think about it. And the second one is they kept hearing, I need to talk to my partner. Even though they had a wall full of client testimonials, even though they had state-of-the-art programs, and even though people were interested in coming to the table looking for PT, for some reason, there were those two things. Now, these objections are going to be the ones that I'm going to be focusing most on in this masterclass because it indicates two things. An unresolved value gap for a person where someone is not recognizing the value that's there, and a decision maker delay where there is either not the right person at the table or you haven't clarified that a person actually has to make a decision. As we go through this process, I'm going to call back to the training station because it's going to help you understand what's going on. So when we're taking a look at this offer structure that's here, and you're hearing 22 to 25 consults a week, but they're getting maybe 1 to 2 signups out of that, which is very low. Most people, in terms of the sales process, would immediately go into, well, they just need a better sales script. They would say, hey, you got to go and you got to iron out the offer. You have to continuously practice the sales script process, and you have to sell these people harder. The issue, though, has nothing to do with the way that the gentleman was approaching sales, their main salesperson. It was actually an internal sales system and a process. Whenever we are understanding objections, we have to look and realize that where the heck do these objections come from? Objections will come from our core 4, and then it will affect a hidden 5th area, which a lot of people don't recognize as well, which is decision readiness. So the core 4, where objections will come from, first is trust, second is certainty, value, and investment. We'll go into, of course, decision readiness afterwards, which is a hidden secret one that people don't realize. So let's go into the first one, which is trust. Where would an objection come from with trust? This is where someone is looking at the client testimonials. They're looking at how you're talking about their journey, and maybe they're recognizing that you're not as qualified as they thought that you were. So point blank, the question is, do I trust you enough to be able to help me? So where a lot of coaches will start to lose trust and where trust will become an objection is when we start talking about all the things we can help someone with, all the areas that we can serve them. And when we're showing client testimonials or we're showing, hey, here's the results that we've provided, it's nowhere near the results of the person that they're looking for. So, for example, if you have a male that's in front of you that's looking to be able to lose 15 to 30 pounds, you should only be showing results and testimonials of other men who have gone through the same scenario. Or if you're going to show things of opposite sex or different types of transformation, you have to then connect to why it's going to be relational to that person. Because they're going to be asking, do you truly understand my unique situation? Great example of this is a person that creates content that talks to everybody. A CEO or someone who's, let's say, a higher up in a company that is working in an executive aspect, they've got different challenges than a stay-at-home mom. And so if your content is always like, we can help you lose weight with general nutrition in this, when you're sitting in the console, you're going to end up using those same words to them. And this is where they're going to say, well, my situation's not like the stay-at-home mom that you're talking about. My situation's not like the guy who just retired that you're talking about. I still actively have a job. I'm still going through the process. And so they're going to start to question, have you successfully worked with someone like me before? And if you think about it, how many clients are going to say, is this going to work for me? It's great that it worked for all of those other people that you're putting the testimonials for, but bottom line, they're going to say, well, I mean, testimonials are regardless of how many you have, I need to know if it's going to work for me. And then, of course, the final aspect of trust is, do I feel emotionally and financially safe engaging in this process with you? There's a part of trusting someone where, from a pre-qualification, imagine you say to someone, hey, there's going to be a financial range and, we've got some pretty flexible options and we'll find something that works with you. Our programs start at 300. Someone goes, okay, not a problem. They hear that number and they say 300. Then they start having a consultation with you and you present them a $1,500 a month option. That's kind of a betrayal of trust. Because in that moment, they're like, well, wait a second. The understanding and the assumption that I had, and now going through the process and what I'm here, I've been presented with something completely different. That would be what I would consider a financial betrayal of trust. The second one would be the emotional aspect. This is a little bit harder because you can sense this in a pre-qualification, but it would be something like someone's like, man, I've worked with 5 or 6 coaches before and just coaches don't understand me. That's a big red flag. And now you go and you let that through. And then what you start doing is you start either breaking down, well, like it's you because you failed with all the coaches and you're the common denominator, but they haven't really given you permission to actually call them out on that. This is where someone is going to feel like they're emotionally attacked and they're going to be like, well, wait a second. These other coaches haven't operated like this. I don't want to operate like this either. So the first area is the area of trust. Okay. Second is certainty. Certainty is just one single simple question. Do I believe this is going to work for me? This is where past failure is going to show up for a lot of your clients. And they're going to look at it in a couple of different ways. The first is evidence that your program is similar to others. This is why inside of a consultation, I don't like it when coaches or when salespeople start talking about all the nitty-gritty bits. Like the moment you start saying, oh, well, inside of this program, we're going to put you on a program that's going to put you in a ketosis. Then someone's like, well, wait a second. No, I've tried a high fat diet before. And so immediately they latch onto what they've done in the past versus how this is going to be different. So the more in depth you go into the program, the more someone has the opportunity to be like, well, I've done that before. I've tried this before. And so there's going to start doing the comparison. The second part of this is internal insecurity. The more complicated the process is that is being presented on the consultation, the more someone's going to be worried that they're actually not going to follow through. Because usually when someone has come to you, you're not the first attempt at this. There's a reason why people look at coaching because they need additional support. They can't do it themselves. And so if they've tried 5 or 6 times, that's the average, and they failed, really haven't seen, I would say, a significant result maybe the first 3 or 4 times, The more you start talking about how complex this process is, and by complex, you're thinking it as I'm going in depth. They're thinking about it as, wow, this is really complex. They're going to start to be worried about their ability to be able to follow through. And then, of course, this leads to the fear of the repetitive cycle. What if this just becomes another thing that I quit? Because if I don't have the ability to follow through, then I'm going to feel uncertain, in which case fear is going to start creeping in. So when we're looking towards objections, there's going to be potential objections on certainty. Now, next one is going to be the value objection. Even if someone has trust and they have certainty that the program is going to work, if the number you give them is not going to be equated to the value that they're receiving, there is going to be a potential objection that shows up here. So AKA, there is a limit that you can put your personal training. The average in the industry is 85 to 125 a session. Some people, if they combine training and nutrition, can get up to 175 a session. But at that point, you're going to be heavily compared to what the value you're giving versus the transformation. Very rarely is someone going to charge $500 a session unless you're like Mark Wahlberg's trainer, or you're doing like NHL athletes and stuff like that. Because again, there's a limit to what people can be able to afford and what they feel the ceiling is on this. This is why we cannot combine value on specific pieces of the program. We have to package it as a transformation. So there's the financial factor of what is the price point that's being presented to me versus what I see the value is. Now, in terms of value, this is where we get to stack these other things, which I would consider non-financial cost factors. How much time is it going to save them to either get to their end destination or to make the process easier throughout the week? If I can save someone 90 minutes or 120 minutes a week, and on top of that, I can, if it would take someone 6 months to see the weight loss, I can tell them that, hey, look, you're going to hit this in 4. They're going to say, you know what? I value speed and I value my time. That's why I'm going to work with a coach. When it comes to energy, point blank, if people feel like it's this huge, heavy process and it's going to be so intense, then they're going to be giving a lot of energy in the process. So how do you save the energy and how do you save the effort? And this could be everything from how you schedule it, the level of commitment that's there, but all of these factors go into the value objection. If we can get 3 or 4, or ideally all of these in a way where someone can see it makes sense with the time that I can commit, like, hey, 2 to 3 times a week, I can do that. Energy, it's going to save me 90 minutes. Awesome. You've got a meal prep guide, which cuts down on the amount of effort. Plus, you're already going to pre-schedule and create all of my workouts. That makes it super simple. In terms of the schedule, it's repeatable. I can book it into my calendar. And so the commitment becomes easy. This is where we can stack all of this and the value is going to be in your favor. But if your programs or your offers don't have ways to save these things, and on top of that, the financial number, there's an energetic disconnect that's there, you're going to get an objection that's going to lead to value. And the last one is going to be, of course, the investment objection. I talked about a lot of this already, but there's 2 pieces to investment. So the first is can I, which I literally just shared. There's going to be a number that's either going to be possible or not possible. So if someone were to say, hey, it's going to be $10,000 a month, you're going to get a hard yes or a hard no, because either it's financially possible or it's not. People will spend an average of $6,500 to $8,500 on their health, or they will commit to something for 8.5 months before they go and they move on. That's kind of the industry standard. Anything past that involves you having to package this as a transformation and involving other aspects of their wallet. Can I is pretty simple. Like there's 4 hitting meanings to this. I simply didn't expect this price point. If you're coming in saying, hey, this is just general personal training, and then you're posting at $200 or $400 a session, well, you're pretty well stacking yourself up to get an investment objection. I don't know why I'm saying injection though, the whole time. We're not injecting anything. Okay. So The second one, like I already shared too, is I don't fully understand the value that's being offered. You're not actually properly connected this. Okay. The real part of investing is not, can I afford it or not? That's either a hard yes or a hard no. The real investment objection is, should I spend money on this right now? There are a lot of people who are in different areas of pain and uncomfortability when it comes with their health. And Tony Robbins is the one that shared that the pain of moving has to be greater than the pain of staying the same. In which case, you have to want the move more than, I'm okay and I can keep this for another month or two. Because everyone, especially in this type of economy, is being conscious on what they are investing in. And in health and fitness, you can't guarantee anything. You can't say, hey, go through this process. I guarantee you're going to lose 30 pounds, because the work and the level of commitment is up to them. And this means they're going to ask, should I spend this money right now? If you think about it, less than a 4-figure investment, $400, $800, that could be somebody's car payment. 4-figure investment, $2,000 to $3,000, that's someone's mortgage. Now you're looking at something like $7,000 to, let's say, $15,000. That's going to be literally, I would say, around 18 to 20% of someone's possible paycheck for the year. If they're going to make that commitment, they're really going to consider, does this make the most sense right now? So this is where you have to look, and in the pre-qualification, you have to mentally and financially prepare them for this decision. And you have to make sure that if there is another person that needs to be involved in this financial choice, that they're either going to be there or that they already approve. So the hidden place where objections can come from. And good old Trax the Wizard has appeared again for you to take a shot of this. If you don't solve this in pre-qual, this is going to be the very objection that kills all of your consultations. Decision readiness. Someone can have the money, someone can see the value, someone can trust you and like you, someone can have all of the pieces together. If they're not fully ready to change, then there's no way they're going to say yes. Worst case scenario, you do what I've done many times early on in my career, is you make someone commit and then they cancel within a week or two because they're just not ready to go through this process. So in pre-qualification, you always have to screen for decision readiness. Otherwise, the answer is going to be no every single time. A person may not mentally be ready to change, as in they're not willing or capable to change the mindset to go past motivation, or someone may not be emotionally ready to change, in which case they're stuck in the victim mode. They're still very unconscious and they need to struggle and suffer a little bit more so then they can actually be in a state. If you have a decision readiness objection, you're going to see a person who's so desperate on the consultation. This has to work for me. You have to give me the results. Does your program have a guarantee? But what if halfway through this, I decide it doesn't make any sense for anymore? Can I back out? Those are huge indicators to me that a decision readiness objection is going to be coming. So this is where we go back to the I need to think about it. Same objection. I need to think about it can cover so many objections because it can have a different meaning depending on the person. I need to think about it can mean I don't understand the program. You made it too complicated and I just can't see myself in it. It can mean I don't trust you yet. We've had a conversation and I don't buy that you're the coach. It can mean I'm scared I'll fail again. It could mean, whoa, this costs way more than I expected. Can mean, look, I'm actually not qualified to make this decision. I gotta unpack this with somebody. Can also mean I don't want this and I'm just looking to get off this call with you because I'm looking to move on. Or it can mean decision readiness. I don't know how to say no. So instead of saying no, I'm going to politely leave something with something that will make you feel a little better. I need to think about it. Same words, completely different diagnosis going through the process. So how do we understand and how do we learn how to tell whether or not an objection is an objection. If we know the 5 areas where they can come from, and we know what we're going to hear, is it going to be an objection or not? Because sometimes things genuinely aren't an objection. And I put it in 3 categories: an unanswered question, a genuine hesitation, and a qualification failure. So when it comes to an unanswered question, sometimes somebody just needs clarity. And this is where recording your consults is very important, because if you have someone before the price ask you 5 or 6 follow-up questions, but like, what's exactly involved in the process? Or so when it comes to speaking with you, like, is this coaching? Is this mentorship? When there's a lack of clarity, or they're like, okay, so what exactly am I getting here? This is you not communicating your program properly. In which case, your job is just to answer questions. So it's like, hey, look, great question. Really appreciate it. In terms of the way we operate, it's going to look like this. And just very point blank, here's what we're going to do. So sometimes it's just an unanswered question. That's not an objection. You don't have to go into, but you said this in the past, or on the pre-qual you said this. Just move on. Second is genuine hesitation. This is what happens, going back to yesterday's masterclass, when you don't focus on clarifying the gap and you don't really diagnose what the issue is. Something specific is unresolved and it's causing internal friction. So example, let's say the person in front of you keeps saying, I just don't have the time. It's a time issue. I just can't seem to fit it into the schedule. And then when you go and you present your program, you don't overcome this time thing, how it's going to save them time, how it's going to be able to be streamlined in terms of their time because they're committing 2 to 3 times a week. Then because you left that thing unresolved, an objection is going to appear. And this is where they're going to be like, oh, well, I'm not really sure because, I need to think about it, because they're not fully understanding how you're going to be able to go through that. Genuine hesitation is going to come from when you say, how do you feel about the program? Can you see yourself going through the process like we talked about yesterday? That's when someone is going to say, well, they're going to bring up what the objection is. I don't really see how this is going to be able to fit into my schedule. It's already overwhelming for me to do it with the food. I don't know how I can be able to fit this in. Perfect. Now we can help them process that. The majority of objections is not unanswered questions and genuine hesitation. It's qualification failure. This is where all of your objections come from. Anytime I hear a recording and I hear someone say a specific thing, I know right in that moment we didn't qualify this person properly. And it happens as early as 5 or 6 minutes into the conversation. So it's either a lack of fit. We push them to the consultation, even though we were getting some indicators that they weren't going to be a good fit for this, or it's a lack of resources. If someone starts hopping on the consultation and they're like, yeah, I'm really conscious of my finances and like, I really need this to desperately work. And, do you have a guarantee because I can only invest a single time? I know that a pricing objection is going to come because this person's not qualified. Or if a person goes in and they're like, yeah, so today I just want to let you know up front that I'm just going to have a conversation. And then I really want to help unpack this with my partner because like we don't make decisions same day. Then I know that this person is not ready to start within the week and that they're not qualified. They should have been in on the call in the first place. Anytime you were to think back to how the consultation ended, where the person left without making a decision, you can tie this back to a qualification process. And that's why I say you need to focus so hard on the qualification piece. So let's make our way back to the training station. They were doing the 22 to 25 consults a week, and they were getting those 2 objections, right? I need to think about it. I need to speak with my partner. The issue was not the way that they were going about the actual consultation. The training station had something that was called a core plan. And what they were doing is they were basically changing the name of a consultation. And they're like, we're just going to get you in. It's going to be a core plan. It's a sit down with a coach. They're going to review your goals. They're going to make sure that you're successful. And so none of that says You're here to talk about personal training and how we're going to go through the process to work with you for a coach. The person thinks that they're coming in for free advice. And so a lot of people would book because it's a low barrier diagnostic, but a lot of them didn't have any intent on actually working with a coach. They were there to pick the brain of the coach that's in front of them to help them succeed. So the training station was like, oh man, like we're going to be able to sell $1,000 plus programs. But the actual reality of it is like, look, the client and the actual person had a huge disconnect. So the way that the qualification was happening brought a person who had expectations that was different. And this is why the way you qualify someone has to be super specific. Because if you're just going to then go and make the recommendation that you're going to do anyways and not qualify them, why even take them through a qualification process? Now, this goes back to this second piece. Oh man, I need to go and discuss this with my partner. Their investment was not pre-qualified. When they did the pre-qualification, they would ask, what are your goals? Why does this matter? Are you looking to start today? They would do all the things. But when it came to actually talking about the investment, they said something which was the cringiest. I was like, man, you would never do this at a store. Oh, when you come in, like if you're interested in services, the coach is just going to chat with the investment with you. They had no understanding of what this number would be. They just completely dodged it to book conversations. And so what happened was a person would come to the consultation. They're paying a $99 membership at the gym. They're talking about coaching and support and all this stuff. They don't have any context. And then they're like, yeah, if you want to work with the coach, our transformation program starts at $1,250. And someone's like, holy shit, $1,250. Well, I'm definitely going to have to talk with my partner because when I came into the consult, my partner knows that I'm paying $99 a month. I can make a decision on my own, maybe for $300 to $400 a month, but I can't make it at $1,250 a month. Of course, they got to speak with their partner because there wasn't the communication piece. The objection of money normally comes down to someone having to package it on their own. And that's why you have to share with them an investment range up front, one that actually makes sense. Because if you say on a pre-qualification, hey, our programs range between $350 to $660 a month, then a person can go and they're mentally unpacking, okay, do I have the funds? If it's 600, okay, maybe I can commit for 3 or 4 months. If it's 300, yeah, I can budget, I can cut out my additional spend. They figure out how to be able to make it work. So if they're coming to a consultation and they get a surprise in terms of length of time, the amount of financials that has to be put down, or the amount of commitment that needs to be made, you're going to get an objection through that process. So there's kind of a third area too. Too many options. The overwhelming menu. When they started talking about coaching, all of the sudden, they're being presented with 6 sheets in front of them, 2, 3, 4, 5 times a week. We do have personal training, but we also have semi-private training. But if you don't want to do that, we also have you can just do a 4-month gym membership. And so people were left trying to make the decision on their own. It was so overwhelming. Of course, the objection is going to be, I need to think about it and I need to discuss this with someone else. The irony is the person to discuss it that's proper is right there in front of you. But they just confuse the crap out of you. Why would you use them to be able to unpack this? So a lot of the objections you're going to get from those 5 areas of the trust, the certainty, the decision-making, they're created upstream. So if someone hears the price too late, if the wrong person gets booked, if a key decision maker is missing, if your offer is being explained differently each and every time, you're guaranteed to receive an objection. I can teach you how to be able to objection handle, but in reality, you should never be receiving the objection in the first place. And there's a rule that I want to share with you guys. If you have to help someone overcome more than 3 objections, the wrong person was in the room. And so what that looks like in a consultation is like this. Someone goes, I'm not really sure about whether this is going to work in terms of time. You go, hey, well, here's how we're going to be able to help with time. And then the person goes, well, I'm kind of concerned about the investment. Do you have a guarantee? Well, look, I guarantee you, you're going to be in the same place another 5 to 10 years from now, if not worse, if you don't go through this process. And it's going to cost you double the time and double the money. Cool. And now the third objection is like, well, if I commit through this process, like, what if I don't like the coach? I cannot make the change. Once we start getting into the third process, I already know this person is not a good fit. Instead of convincing them, I have to then write down the mental note. There was somewhere along the aspect of the objections that I failed. Because you're not going to spend an hour or 2 hours objection handling with someone on a consult. A consult should be finished in 45 minutes. In which case, this is where you're going to say, hey, based on the conversations that we're having, I think you're actually not a good fit. I really apologize, but we need to be working with people who are going to be in a readiness state. And this is where now you have to be able to do that pushback for them. So I did say that I was going to teach you how to objection handle. And I will, because there is a framework in what I call the ACER framework. So how you can be able to actually ace an objection handle, because some people are going to put an objection to you. And again, a lot of times it's just a one-off fear thing. You will know the objection where it's like someone is not ready, or, hey, I can actually help someone through this process. So the ACER framework for you to ace your next objection that you get is we're going to acknowledge, we're going to clarify, we're going to explore, and then we're going to resolve. As I go through these steps, I want you to know there's not a script for this. I only teach processes. I will never teach scripts, because if someone is memorizing a script happens in a specific order. And then if you forget pieces of the script, or if you go off the script, then this whole thing just completely falls apart, and the wheels are just you're watching, like, as your car's going, the wheels are just going to be rolling off the side of the road. So for you to not crash through this process, just remember the framework going through the process. So step one, we've got to acknowledge it. Someone puts an objection to, I just don't think it's going to work in terms of time. Okay. We don't argue with people. Remember, we're sitting at the same side of the table. So first step, I then put time across the table. So the way that I do that is in a conversation with a friend or a family member or a colleague, someone that we're working together on the problem. When a problem is presented, we have to acknowledge that the problem exists. That's totally fair. Hey, that makes perfect sense. Actually, I appreciate you being honest with me. I can see how time is going to be an issue through this. Let's talk through that. The moment we acknowledge the problem that exists, the person then lowers their guard, because they go, okay, it's normal for me to feel this. There's no pushback of what's come next. Then we're going to go and we're going to clarify. So when it comes to the clarification, this is where we have to break down what it is about the objection. So when it comes to timing, based on the conversations we've had, it sounds like the issue is not necessarily you not having the time, but based on your current schedule and the way that your routine is set up, it's that if you commit this time, it might feel very overwhelming for you. Is that fair to say? And the reason why we say, is that fair to say, is because we want to get the clarification correct, and we want the person to say yes to label themselves with the problem. So if I say, oh, it sounds like the issue is not really time, but actually the commitment, and you're going to start to feel overwhelmed through the process, is that fair to say? The person is going to say two things. Yes. Okay, amazing. Now we've completely nailed this objection. Or they're going to say no. In which case I'm going to say, can you explain it to me? And then they're going to say, well, my concern is not necessarily about my ability to make the commitment to the time, but that I've spent the time in the past and that it hasn't worked. Okay, cool. So this is not a time objection. This is if it hasn't worked objection. And now you're going to clarify, and you're going to do the same thing. You're going to say, okay, so from what I've just heard from you, you're concerned that in going through the process and investing the time, because your time's already tight, that the program may not work for you based on the things that you've done from the past. Is that fair to say? Yes. We need to get a yes before we go into the next part of this process. So we're going to explore. This is where we have to explore what is possible or where this objection is leading to. In the example I just gave, it's a fear of failure. So when you say a specific objection, I need to think about it, or I'm afraid that I'm not going to succeed through the process, I don't know if this is going to work for me, we need to explore where that comes from. So when you say that you feel like it's not going to work for you, where do you feel like that's coming from? Is it your past experience? Is it a story that you're telling yourself? Are you maybe using the past failures to dictate what it's going to be in the future? What does that look like? In which case now we're helping the person unpack that objection to see if it's something that's valid or it's not. Truth, all objections lead to fear. And fear is false evidence appearing real. So we need to show them where the evidence is false by recognizing, hey, this thing doesn't actually exist. Your history, it doesn't have to repeat itself because you have a coach now. When you say you need to think through something, what specifically do you need to think through? Because I'm the best person to help you unpackage this. When you say it's more than expected, okay, well, is that the total investment? Is it the timing? Or is it whether it feels worth it? Because I'm here to help you move through the process. And then this is where now we actually start to find the meaning behind the surface level excuse. If we find the meaning, then we can dissipate it and we can ask for the decision. But if we never actually get what they mean behind the words, just like I need to think about it, there could be 75 different things that they're going to bring up through the process. So the final part of this framework is resolve. This is where now we have to address the real issue. And guess what? There's limited issues: trust, certainty, value, investment, and readiness. Remember, that's where objections come from. So if it's trust, it takes time to build trust. Like, I don't really see any testimonials with someone like me. And this is where you need to be honest. Honesty is what builds trust. I'll be honest with you, we've maybe worked with 6 people like you. But here's what I can tell you. Everyone who's gone through the process has lost weight successfully. And as a coach, I'm here to make sure you make it past the finish line, because I can't have someone walking around as a billboard of, hey, I worked with this coach and they didn't see results. My concern is not you seeing results. My concern is going through the process. I want to make sure it's comfortable. I want to make sure it's easy and simple for you, so that way it's something realistic for you to maintain moving forward. I would trust a person who puts behind that. Be honest. If someone says it's a lot of fear, yeah, look, it's a scary process. Be honest about it. If someone has an issue with commitment and they're like, oh, I don't know about 6 months. You know what? A lot of the stuff that you've done in the past, to be honest with you, has been pretty short. And that's why it hasn't seen results. We position this at 6 months. We position it at 8 months because it takes time for you to be able to build this as a part of a consistent routine. Awesome. To combat trust, we use honesty. Then there's certainty. If someone has an objection, we need to give them certainty that they're in the right room and this is the right process. And the way that we combat certainty is by making it feel like it's normal. Look, do you know how many people I've speak to and inside the consultations, they're scared shitless about starting this process? Man, that's normal. Anytime you commit to something that's serious, think about when you bought your first house. You were scared shitless. Think about when you took on your first car and then you drove home and you were like, oh, like a nervous excitement. That's a normal part of making big decisions that are going to be right for you. Perfect. We validate it. It's a normal part of making these decisions that are going to be right from you. When it comes to value, well, we just have to reconnect the solution to their problem. You tell me that you've been struggling to lose this weight for 5 years or 10 years. This program is going to take 10 years worth of struggled effort, and we're going to combine it into a 6-month process that's streamlined at 2 to 3 times a week. It's simple, and you're not going to need to spend another year after this worried about the 10 years that you've struggled. So what we do is we compare the value to the gap. I'm going to keep coming back to the gap. You have to create the gap for them. If it's investment, man, there's not much you can do about investment. Truthfully, if someone is not financially willing to invest, they're either not pre-qualified properly or the program that you presented to them is not something they're willing to put money down. Point blank. If someone is willing to work with you on investment, they will tell you. They're going to say, look, I really appreciate the two options you put in front of me. It's tight. I can't squeeze it. I want to make the monthly work. Can you do a biweekly? Like, can we extend the payment plan to 8 months instead of 6? Because it's a little too much for where it is right now. A person who's open to working with you in investment, the only thing that you're going to discuss is just different financial options. Hey, you can save $600 or $700 by paying in full. Hey, we can drop you from 3 times a week to 2 times a week. We'll get you committed to a longer term, but it actually changes your monthly payment by $100 a month. All that is doing kind of what like dealers do at car places, which is like, how do we like make the payment make sense? And again, it's just a talk and just being honest with the number. Like, hey, cool. Would this make sense? Does this work? That's where you're finding something together. If it's readiness, you have to tell the truth about what it takes. Your only responsibility in a consult is to permanently shift someone's mindset, mentally and emotionally, to make a commitment to themselves. So if they're like, I'm not sure, I need to think about it. Like, we can make a joke about this. And I mean, there's so many different ways to do this. Like, you need to think about it. How many years you want? 10, 15, right? Took you 6 years to sit in front of a coach. Are you actually going to go home and then you're going to sit in your island and you're going to be like, oh man, I'm going to contemplate my life's decisions? Like, no, you're not going to do that, right? You know that at some point you have to stop thinking about the decision and you actually have to decide. And that's why I'm here to make you do that. And I didn't say help you do that. I said make you do that because let's be real, we're all guilty of sabotaging ourselves, right? Yeah. Okay, cool. Let's do this. It's that simple. We show the truth about what it's going to take. Yeah, look, there's a reason why a lot of people struggle with weight loss because you got to be committed to shit. But that's exactly why coaching exists, so we can help you through the process. So by resolving, we end up addressing the real issue. Once we do that, we just bring them back to the decision. Hey, knowing that, does still feel like the right next step for you? Yes, cool. Let's get started. Or, hey, now that we've unpacked that, let's get you rolling. Very simple and assumptive close. No pressure, no convincing, just making the commitment straight through. Most common objections that you're going to hear in health and fitness. I need to think about it. I need to talk with my spouse. Those are the top 2. That's why we spent a lot of time with them. It's more than I expected. That's a finance issue. You didn't pre-qualify them. I can't afford it. Same thing. Finance issue. Didn't qualify. I want to try on my own first. This is a readiness objection. Again, you either didn't explain to them the struggle and the gap as to whether or not they need support with a coach, or they actually think that they can genuinely do it by themselves. So you need to focus more on extending the gap and helping them diagnose that they can't do it by themselves. Now isn't the right time. Man, I've been hearing this a lot on call recordings. I want to do it in another 3 or 4 months, like when I'm actually ready. Like once the kids go back to school, that's when I'm going to do it. Now, not the right time is still a gap issue. You're not showing them that their problem is big enough that they have to do it right in the moment. And it's also a pre-qualification issue. You didn't ask them if they were ready to start within the next week. Because guess what? People can start today. Why are they having conversations on something they're going to commit 3 months from now? Next objection, I'm worried that I won't follow through. This comes down to decision readiness, and it's a fear objection. So the question is, you have to figure out what they're not going to follow through on. What are you concerned that you won't follow through on? The training, the nutrition, that you won't be able to have the commitment to stay through the process, that you won't actually follow through on the program? What is it? And only from there do you then go back to addressing the time, addressing the stuff that goes in it. But that is one where you have to do more digging and figure out what's going on. Can I get back to you? Is a nice way of saying, I'm not going to get back to you. It's different than I need to think about it. Can I get back to you? Can I table this for later? Hey, we're going to circle back on this. I'm convinced that you're not the person. There's a trust issue. And when I hear an objection like that, I train people to say, you don't like me, do you? And that makes people laugh, but it also then makes people be truthful. You know what? I don't think the program's it. Or, you know what, man, you seem really great, but like, I don't know, the energy's off. Like, I'm not in. Cool. But that's the best way to be able to disarm that. So the spouse objection, let's go into a bunch of that. And that's why we need some additional time for this stuff. Okay. I want to tell you that every single human being on this planet that has a partner can make a decision on their own and they don't need their spouse to decide. Great example of this, that picture that's on the slide there was at something called the Unstoppable Badass event that my wife and I run every single year for her ladies. So we had 15 people in the room and they invested anywhere from $900 to $3,300 to be there, to be in the room. Of course, they had conversations with their partners. We planned 6 months ahead for the event. It's a 2-day full experience where they're with us for lunch. They're doing different things. Like it's basically like a collective that we run. At the end of that presentation, where I put that slide up, you're working to become unstoppable and unstoppable as a state. We pitched the Unstoppable Badass Mastermind, UBM, and we pitched it 4 months for $5,500. So on the spot, we said, hey, we're only taking 6 spots because it's a very intimate program. 2 people signed up on the spot and an additional 3 people signed up by the end of the day. They didn't talk to their partners. They all had partners. And the number one thing that I said is, hey, look, I'm in. We're just going to be able to shift some things around. Like, just give me a second here, and then I'm going to chat with my partner afterwards. They signed up and then they spoke with their partner afterwards. And do you know what the conversations were? The conversation was, hey, I just signed up for this program, think it's going to be really beneficial. I'm excited for it. The only thing that I really just need your support with is whether or not we're going to do payments or pay in full. If you think about the way you operate with your partner, yes, you have conversations and yes, you're responsible human beings. But genuinely, if you believe you need your partner to help afford it, you're going to bring them to the consult. Hey, I'm looking to commit to a program. I just want you to be with me because there's going to be a financial piece of this. I just need to make sure it makes sense. Or you're going to have the conversation ahead of time. Hey, I'm looking to join a program and the program is going to be about $3,000. Is there a way that we can make this work? So if you are getting, I need to talk to my spouse at the end of your consultation, you got to ask yourself a serious question. Why the hell did you only discover that there was a decision maker at the end? Like, you never asked? It doesn't make any sense. This is why we have pre-qualification for. Look, is there someone that helps make financial decisions with you through this process? If so, I recommend that you bring them to the consultation. It's very straightforward. I can give you a range right now. It's between $300 to $800 a month. But if you feel like there's going to be someone you're going to chat about the program with, I'd recommend they're there because that way they can fully understand the program. Because if you go home and you start saying, hey, this is what's involved, you're not going to say it the way that we say it. Easiest thing is to have them be in the room. So can your partner be in the room? Yes. Cool. That's the way we break down the spouse objection and the way we go through the process. Now, there's a gentleman that we worked with, Keith, at Positive Change Health. He was having the same issue. So he was working with men. Men don't communicate to their partners very well about, hey, this is what's involved in the program. And his program was pretty high cost. He was selling $2,500 to $5,500 for 4-month programs. Now, he was selling at that price point because it wasn't just standard training and nutrition. This was like a full lifestyle change. He would actually go to their house. There was like different experiences that he would take his guys on, like just different stuff. So because it was a very intimate program, whenever he would have the conversations with the person, then the person would go back with their partner and they would start communicating with it. And then it would just never ended up being communicated the same. So he would have about 30% of his consultations where they were like, look, I actually do need to talk with my partner about this, just kind of go nowhere. And so what I realized is we can change the buy-in journey to be able to address this. So that way, by the time a person sits in front of us, they don't need their partner to make a decision. They can make the decision on their own. So we can eliminate the spouse objection by doing 2 things: inviting the spouse there or getting someone who's self-led who can make decisions on their own. And so here's what we did with him. We put in effectively a buy-in journey. So when he would have a DM conversation with a person, he'd still do his 15-minute qualification call. But before he did anything to bring them to the consultation, he had them do homework. Hey, right after the call, I want you to watch this video, and then I want you to listen to this podcast. Once you watch the video and listen to this podcast, send me a message that you did. They do. And then after they send the message, he would send over a reflection sheet. And he said, I want you to do this with your partner, and I want you to send the reflection sheet back to me. And all the guys would go and do the reflection sheet. For the ones who were like, you know what, the reflection sheet's a little much, stuff like that, or they would start to lose interest in a part of the process. He goes, look, if you're struggling with the reflection sheet, you need to be in this masterclass that I run every other week. And then boom, put himself in the masterclass position. So in that case, people came in, they understood the full context. He invited the partners to the masterclass. So they already understood what the process of working with Keith looked like. So by the time he went and brought that person to the consultation, which would usually be a week or week and a half process, that intention behind that person, they did not need to speak to their partners. Their partners knew what was involved. Their partners knew what they were getting into. And that person was ready to make a decision on their own to be able to actually invest. Never did he have to ask, hey, do you make decisions with your partner to do this? We just changed the buy-in journey. And so what I would encourage you guys as well too, is if you're getting this objection, look at the buy-in journey and where can you either put action steps or straight up invite them to the consultation to make the process happen. So where should the objection have been solved? I've said it from the very beginning, don't just handle the objections at the end. If you keep hearing the same objection over and over again, where you look over the span of a month and it happens more than 3 or 4 times, this is where we need to look at our areas. We need to look at our content. Can we educate around? So let's use making a decision. I need to talk to my spouse. Can we educate around making the decision together? Or can we create content talking about being a self-led person that makes decisions on their own? When it comes to qualification, hey, can we ask, is another decision maker involved? When it comes to the pre-consultation, can we ask, did they actually understand the investment beforehand? Did we give them a range that makes sense where they don't need to talk to their partner? When it comes to the consult, did we uncover this problem before presenting the recommendation? 6 or 10 minutes in, a person goes, yeah, all of this sounds really good. I'm really excited to talk to my partner about this. Whoa, hang on a second. What do you mean talk to your partner about this? Right? Are we addressing it as it comes up in the consultation if it does? And then follow up. If they absolutely have to talk with their partner, what's the next step? Are you saying, hey, look, I want to make sure that the conversation with your partner is in alignment with your goals. Why don't we book a call for this afternoon? Are you free at 6 p.m. or 7 p.m.? Same day. Let's get your partner in here and let's hash this out. Boom. We can do this with all of the objections to start minimizing it and increasing the sales process. So I want you to fix the system, not just the salesperson or you selling. So always ask, where did we fail to create context? Where people are arriving the decision without enough clarity? Why are we discovering these objections or these potential problems late in the process? So don't just get focused on dealing with the objection, focusing on always auditing and restructuring your pipeline. That's the only thing that matters to make this more consistent. So how do we do that? Guess what? Start tracking your freaking objections. There's 3 pieces that I always look when I'm looking at other people's companies for where objections are coming from. And I ask these questions. You don't have to write anatomy, context, closing loop, because that's just the different areas of which it affects, but the questions are right there. So what objection came up? Anytime I run an offer or a program or I do a consult, I run an audit of that consultation right afterwards. And I ask these questions. What objection came up? What was actually underneath it? So was that the real objection or was there something else? Because we want to separate the excuse from the real hesitation. Then, what was the offer that they were considering? What did I push to them or promote to them? And then, where did this person come from? Because let's say all of the leads from Instagram keep having issues with, I need to talk with my partner, then Instagram is a less qualified funnel than your other referrals or your other closed loops. This allows us to show us where we need to start changing either our channels or start educating certain channels more. And then the last one, who ran the consultation if it wasn't you, and what was the outcome? What was the outcome of this consultation? It was unsuccessful. Perfect. By the way, you should be tracking objections for successful consultations as well as failed consultations. Because don't you want to improve getting less objections all around? So, what was the outcome? Did they buy or did they not buy? And then ask, what do we change upstream? What a part of the pre-qualification process or the content do I need to shift to minimize this from happening again? So we've slammed this fun stuff, which is fantastic. And one thing that I will bring back to the forefront again before I open up to questions is, look, you don't need to become better at fighting objections. You want to build a process that creates fewer ones. And so going back into No BS Sales, so we've already got a couple signups, which is really great. Enrollment is open, and we're going to be taking enrollment all the way up to September 14th. The goal is for you and I to build the engine of your qualification process and your sales process. Everything from getting really clear on the offer, how we talk about it, the funnel, the qualification, how people buy in so they get fired up for the consult, and then actually how we run that consult specifically for you. Everything that I just shared as a part of these past two masterclasses, and even what I shared at CanFit as well, these are great general guidelines, but you all have different businesses. Some of you might be doing DM sales, in which case the way we qualify changes. Some of you might do in-person consultations. How we approach that is different than just doing online consultations, for example. So we build out the execution that makes sense for your business. And then we're going to be able to build out some pipeline tracking for you to be able to see, how do I hand this off to future people? Or what do I track? So that way, from offer all the way to assets and tracking and follow-up, all of that is taken care of and you have a clear understanding of what's going on. So you're going to build a ton of things through this process, but I want to share with you guys that this is more than just the build. Sales is the lifeblood of your coaching business. If you do not bring more people on, more than people finish up the journey with you, you're going to have a really hard time in this industry. If you're trying to build your location in your facility and you're trying to keep coaches, you need to be full. More sales is the answer. If you're a solo entrepreneur and you're just getting your coaching business started, or maybe you're in the interim where you're going to be having 2 to 5 conversations a week, you need to sell. And those conversations need to actually turn into qualified clients, because this is the only industry where clients don't stay forever, where a good, successful person will eventually leave at some point. And that means that you're going to have to sell more than the people start leaving your world. And if you don't sell, or you can't sell in a way that's consistent, well, then guess what? You're going to have a hard time running your business moving forward. So this is more than just actually building the pipeline. This is also being able to set yourself up in a position where you're confident with the sales process. So over the span of these past 2 days, and even in CanFit, you learned the method. Now inside of No BS, we're going to help you install it directly into your business. Now with that, every single weekly call, there's actually going to be 2 calls a week, is going to be building it as we go along. So that way we know, like, you're working on 15 other million things in your business, but we have one dedicated call of application and then one call of asking questions. That way, through the process of the 8 weeks, you're not feeling overwhelmed, and you are going to have the system fully built out with the questions answered through the entire process. You get the live role play as well. So if you've got sales that are going on, then we're going to be listening to pieces of that qualified call. And then we're going to be unpacking any of the objections are there. So that way you can understand exactly what's going on with you. And plus, you're also going to have the crew that's going to be on those calls as well. So then you can learn from their experiences and what's going on. So like I shared, yesterday. It is 8 weeks. We're starting September 14th. And the founding members rate for this is going to be $12.99. So that's going to be the investment, or you can do it in 2 payments of $7.49. It's whatever's easier for you. There is a fast action bonus that ends September 1st. So once it gets to September 1st, we're going to be bumping it up to $24.99 because there's a shit ton of stuff that's going to be in this program. So caps at 35 spots. Get your freaking butt in there. 8 weeks of training, 8 weeks of No BS Sales Labs, and up to 3 people from your company will get to be in the process there. So I will drop the link again in the chat to the growmycoaching.com / nothing but service sales. And then I will also send out both of the recordings via email as well too. So spoken 1,500 years, a million miles a minute to be able to go through the process. But I want to open the floor up to good old questions. Who's got some questions? If you got questions, you can do one of 3 things. You can unmute yourself, hop on camera. Actually, technically, that's the same thing, and ask your question. You can just unmute yourself and just ask your question, or you can drop it in the chat, and I will be happy to support you, folks. So let's, boom, unshare that. See my beautiful face through the process? Yeah. All right. Anybody got any fun questions? And as promised, like I said, I'm happy to stay here for longer because I know I went a little bit over to help you all answer anything that's on the mind. If you're able to, what's one takeaway you can drop in the chat that you received from this training? I'm always curious. Oh, we got to have some takeaways. Shimson, Ray, what did we learn through this fun process? Lots to unpack as always. Yes, tons of stuff. I tend to, so it's very interesting, Ray, and also for those who are watching the recording as well too. So I realized I did it midday because this is what had worked for us. I got some requests to put it some future trainings in the evening, so I'll make sure to do that. A really interesting part of putting together a slide deck is there's the stuff you want to cover, the stuff you have to cover, and then the in between, which is like the connections. So that was 34 slides, but it's like 34 slides and it's like an hour and 10 minutes. So I try to keep stuff as potent as possible. But yeah, Shimson says honesty equals trust. Yeah, hell yeah, it does. And the more honest you can be, the more someone is going to. So here's the thing with honesty, Shimson. People are afraid to be honest because they think it's going to push away a sale. So if someone were to say something like, I'll never be able to lose weight because I have a hard time with my genetics. And then you're like, in your head, you're like, this is not a genetics thing. Say that. The very thing that you say inside your head, we can be honest because people find honesty refreshing. And also you're going to be honest inside of your coaching process. So the way that we create the container for coaching is we're honest in the consultation. So anytime someone tells me I'm short on time, I say, you always make time for your kids, right? Yeah. Okay. So is it that you're short on time, or is it that the time that you're spending is spent in other places and maybe you just need to put some more value towards this? Okay. That's trust, right? That's the big thing. So it's a huge thing, right? Here's the key with honesty. When you're being honest with someone, it's not about being a dick. It's coming from a place of care. So I'm not saying it's not genetics. You're just eating like shit. I'm not going to go and say that on a consultation. One, because I don't coach that way. I'm not a drill sergeant. But also at the same time, a person's going to feel a negative experience. So for me, when someone says something that I don't agree with or that I think is going to prevent them, I will educate them. And this is where it's not coaching. It's just an explanation of what is. So if someone says, oh man, like, my parents have been overweight and I've been this. And what I say is, hey, I really appreciate you sharing with me your parents' experience. I want you to know that their experience doesn't have to be your experience. And I've never met a person that I haven't been able to help lose weight. You telling me it's a genetics issue is you replaying a story, and I'm here to end that story. That's honesty. And if you do that and you do that frequently with people, at the end, it's just going to be an open conversation of how we get you started. So I appreciate you sharing that. And Ray says, I love to review and set up a follow-up once digested. 100%. Yes. Digestion is key. So, and guess what? This has actually been recorded properly. So you're actually going to get this one right after. And I've been notified as well too, that the other recording is already ready, and you'll be seeing the slides and not the side of my head. So I will be dropping both recordings to all of you guys and all of the people who are watching this recording in about an hour and a half. So thanks, folks, for hopping on. Really appreciate you taking the time to learn about sales. I think if you learn how to sell better, it just makes your life in coaching so much easier. And just don't shy away from it. There's always going to be great conversations to be had. And worst case scenario, just educate someone. So yeah, really appreciate it. Thank you, Ray. So thanks to everybody who hopped on live. Thanks to all of you who watched the recording. And remember, if you've got any questions on No BS Sales, you can always send an email back to the email that I'm going to send to you guys with the recordings, or just drop like a message on Instagram as well at Coach Andrew Costa, and we can always voice chat back and forth, see if it makes more sense for you. So, all right, have fun, folks. Thanks for staying 15 minutes later. Enjoy, and we will see you on the next masterclass or No BS Sales. Bye, folks.